and welcome to Deals with Heels, where female entrepreneurs thrive. I'm Debra, your host. Welcome to the show. So excited to have this week's guest. She has been a guest on so many things, much bigger than me, and we are so grateful to have her share her infinite wisdom with us. You guys know that I spent over a decade in fight or flight, so she is going to come in and help us conquer our fears and tell us all the great stories that she has that have helped her and about all of her great stuff. Her name is Rhonda Britten. She is an Emmy Award winner, a repeat Oprah guest, master coach, and has changed lives in over 600 episodes of reality television, including starring in the hit daytime reality show Starting Over. She's the author of 4 bestsellers, including her seminal work, Fearless Living, and is the founder of the Fearless Living Institute, which is home of the Ivy League of life coaching training. She's been named America's favorite life coach. She brings the neuroscience of fear down to earth, giving you a path out of not being good enough using the Wheels technology that she developed that saved her own life. Please help me welcome Rhonda to Deals with Heels.
Yay!
We're so glad to have you. I am so dying to have you tell your story. So let's just start with that. Tell us all about how you became
Ended up
so
here?
how you ended up here. How did you get here? How did you get to where you are? And I'm sure a lot of people probably know your story, but I think tons of people probably haven't heard it either, or at least haven't heard it in a while. So let's hear
Well,
it.
why don't I just tell you about the worst day of my life? Because I believe that the worst day of our lives have the seeds of our destiny in it. And when we're in the midst of our worst days, we don't know that, right? We're just trying to crawl through glass. But when we look back at our lives, I bet we can see a thread from the very worst days of our lives. If we tied them all together, they would probably point to where we are today. And the same is true for me. So the worst day of my life, I was 14 years old. I grew up in a little tiny town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow every winter. In fact, it snowed till May this year. Just FYI, it was snowing in May. Just FYI. And there was a blizzard at the end of April. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. And there was 2 restaurants, the fancy Douglas House Buffet Hotel and Big Boy. We didn't even have McDonald's. That was too fancy for us. And my parents had recently separated. And it was Father's Day. My father was going to come over to take us out to Sunday brunch, my mother, me, and my 2 sisters. And so I'm in my mother's bedroom, and she's fluffing up her beehive hairdo and putting on her rose-colored lipstick and putting on her blue eyeshadow. And my 2 sisters are in the one bathroom fighting it out. And my dad comes through the back door. Come on, girls, let's go. Because that's what dads do. And so me and my mom start walking towards the back door. My sister is still fighting it out in the bathroom. And as me and my mom and dad walk out, it's starting to sprinkle. So my dad says he's got to get his coat from the car. Now, this coat is a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat. And for those of us who remember what the leisure suit coat looked like, well, let's just say my father with his plaid shirt and his polyester pants was looking good with that Naugahyde leisure suit coat, let's just say. So as he's opening his trunk to get his coat, I notice in the corner of my eye that he has not grabbed a coat. He has grabbed a gun. And he starts yelling at my mother, "You made me do this. You made me do this." And he fires. And I start screaming, "Dad, what are you doing? Dad, stop. What are you doing?" And he cocks the gun again and he points it at me. And I absolutely believe I'm next. And he stares at me. I stare at him. He blinks. I blink. I blink. He blinks. And my mother, who's seen what's happening with her last breath, literally screams out, "No, don't." And my father, realizing in that moment that my mother is still alive, takes that bullet intended for me, shoots my mother a second time. It goes through her abdomen, out her back, lands in the car horn. And for the next 30 minutes, all I can hear is. And then my father cocks a gun a third time, puts the gun to his head and fires. So in a matter of 2 minutes, I was a sole witness of watching my father murder my mother and commit suicide in front of me. Now, I don't know how other people would respond, but this is how I responded. It's my fault because I was the only one physically out there that could have stopped it. So I didn't kick my father's shins. I didn't grab and wrestle the gun from him, and I didn't jump in front of my mother. And now they're dead. So in that moment, I basically split into 2, the outside Rhonda and the inside Rhonda. The outside Rhonda was, I'm fine. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. But the inside Rhonda guilt, shame, self-hatred. You can't be happy when you watch your parents die, so that's off the table. So for the next 20 years, I lived these two lives. The outside Rhonda got scholarship to college, full ride. The inside Rhonda discovered alcohol. And in order to stuff and soothe my emotions, alcohol became my best friend. And so I became an alcoholic. I also ended up getting 3 DUIs and tried to kill myself 3 times. And it was at the third suicide attempt that I realized something. I realized I'm not good at killing myself, not good at it. And I got to figure this out because life isn't changing. And now during those years of alcoholism, suiciding, and DUIing, I was also a self-help junkie. I mean, I read my first self-help book when I was 12. I was going to be a minister at 13. So during those years that my outside Rhonda was acting out, my inside Rhonda was searching for the answers. I would read books. I would go to workshops. I went to therapy. I did everything I could think of to help myself.
To not feel that way anymore. To not
Yeah.
feel that way.
I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And so here's my third suicide attempt. By the way, when you try to kill yourself, they do put you in a psychiatric ward for evaluation. So I went in the psychiatric ward. I was in there about 4 days. They deemed me not crazy, let me go. And as I got home, I realized that all the work I'd done on myself, everything I'd done gave me a lot of knowledge and gave me a lot of tools, but I never learned how to apply any of those things. I didn't know how to actually change my life. And so I remember sitting in my little studio apartment after they released me and realizing I actually have to start over. And I remember thinking, what do kindergartners do? Well, they get a calendar and gold stars. So I actually went to the store, got a calendar, actually got some gold stars. And for the next 30 days, all I did was give myself a gold star anytime I did anything positive, anything good. And that included getting drunk, but not breaking anything, right? Like that's the level of evolution I was at. And at the end of 30 days, I had a calendar filled with gold stars. And that showed me that I could change my life. I could do it. I applied, I got my stars, I did it. I noticed the good things. And that started opening me up to figuring out what was really holding me back. Because fear wasn't even in my vocabulary. I mean, I grew up in Upper Michigan. I'm Finnish, I'm 100% Finnish. So we don't feel afraid. I mean, even when I was drinking, DUI, and suicide, and if you would have asked me if I was afraid, I would say no. If the day after my parents died, you would have asked me if I was scared, I would have said no. I had no relationship with fear.
Do you think it's part of that because you survived, but it's that I'm 90 foot tall and bulletproof because I should have been, you know what I mean? So you almost have convinced yourself that you're fearless.
I think part of it is that, like I must be alive for a reason, right? And, testing fate with my suicide attempts, my alcoholism, and my DUIs, right? Like, is God going to save me here? Is God going to save me here? But I also knew that the level of guilt I had, that was a lie, right? It was those two things coexisting, right? On one hand, it's like, I'm making it, I'll make it, right? But on the other hand, I wanting to die all the time. I couldn't have a healthy relationship, right? I would date and have one, and then I'd end up dumping him, or who knows what I would do, but I would end up having dysfunctional relationships and attract dysfunctional people for obvious reasons. So here I was at that third suicide attempt and making a new choice, and then deciding that I had to figure this out. And I like to say that the humility was up front and center, right? Because I had done so many things before and they weren't effective. And it was very frustrating. And I think it's frustrating for a lot of people. I don't think I'm alone because, you read these books and they tell you to love yourself. And it's like, well, if you don't know how to love yourself, how do you love yourself? Like, don't tell me how to love myself. Tell me how to love myself.
Yes.
And don't tell me it's a bubble bath. And don't tell me it's, go by the beach. No, that is not self-love. Those are nice self-care things. That's nice, but that's not self-love. So it took me some time of my own healing and my own evolution to really understand how fear played into this and my willingness to actually see fear at all. And that was the beginning of my true transformation and what led me to where I am today, which is building a relationship with fear.
I think fear, I didn't realize I was afraid And my audience knows that I spent a long time in functional freeze. I didn't know that's what it was. I was in grief counseling, and I was telling my counselor how frustrated I was with myself because of my procrastination. And I was on and on about it. And it's not difficult for me to do. I don't know why I can't make myself do it. And it's so
Yeah.
frustrating. And he let me go for, I went probably 5 or 10 minutes on it because that's your one place to vent, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And he tells me, Deborah, you're not procrastinating. And
That's
I
right.
replied, yes, I am. You're not listening to me. And he said, no, you're in fight or flight, but
Yeah.
you're the deer.
Yeah.
You literally can't do it.
That's right. That's right.
And
And
it
I
changed
love
my
that your
life.
therapist said that to you because so many people beat themselves up for procrastination, and it is nothing about procrastination.
Right. I mean, I know when I'm procrastinating, it's not that I don't ever do that, but I wasn't putting shit off. I literally couldn't make the decision to save myself.
Yep.
I was in a very unhappy marriage, and I let who I am, my whole self-worth, who I identify, my passion, all of it just go for survival purposes with all of my kids. And there was nothing left. And I had no idea. I had
Mhm.
no idea I was
Yeah.
in fight or flight. I wouldn't have said that I felt afraid because that's not what I felt. I felt
That's
stuck.
right. That's
I
right.
felt stuck.
That's right.
I
That's
think
right.
I think women cumulatively are in functional freeze. They know something's not right and they're not able to move beyond it.
Well, let me give you a little quiz. Let me give everyone listening and watching a little quiz. If you're able, go ahead and shut your eyes so you don't have to like pay it. Yeah, just listen to my voice. If you're safe to do that, please do. And then I'm going to read a list of words. And if you do any of these things or feel any of these things, I want you to nod your head. Okay. So I want you to nod your head so you know you're saying, yes, I do do that. I do do that. So I'm going to go ahead and start now. So get ready. Shut your eyes if it's safe. If not, please don't. And if you can nod your head, please do. Do you ever isolate yourself? Do you ever pretend everything's okay when it's not? Do you ever hide out? Do you ever whine? Do you ever settle? Do you ever compare yourself to others? Do you ever secretly manipulate? Do you ever get defensive? What about judgmental? Do you ever complain? How about procrastinate? Do you ever wait and call it patience? Do you blame, struggle, worry, reflect? Do you try to control? Do you ever feel bitter, powerless, self-centered, dissatisfied, resentful, entitled? Do you ever feel guilty, disappointed? Do you find yourself being a perfectionist or a people pleaser? Do you sometimes feel overwhelmed, ignored, get caught in self-pity, irresponsible? Do you feel irritated like you might now with me reading these words? Do you feel annoyed? And what about, do you ever feel victimized? So
I
go.
have to say, Rhonda, that that's a pretty short list for me now. I've worked really hard in the last
Mhm.
few years to overcome those, but man, boy, did I see my past self in a whole bunch of those.
Yeah, well, whenever I'm talking to an audience of 1,000 people or 100 people or with a client, I would say that 95% of people nod their head at 95% of those words. And so these are called fear responses. And most people, Deborah, think of these as problems. Think of these as character flaws. Think of them as these are the things that are holding me back. When in fact, these are simply fear responses, which means that you don't get overwhelmed unless you have a fear underneath driving it. You don't feel entitled without a fear driving it. You don't complain without a fear driving it. So everybody, most people are caught up in the fear responses and look at those things and try to solve those things when in fact, they're just responses to a hidden fear that is driving all of us because we all have what I call the wheel of fear. There's no one that doesn't have one. It's part of our neurobiology. And so once you can identify your core trigger, the thing that really drives you, and I promise you, if you think you know what it is, you don't, because it's probably just, if you think like people say, oh, I'm afraid of rejection. No, that's a fear response. Trust me, there's a deeper fear underneath that. So it's about building a relationship with that fear, understanding how it works, and then learning how to relabel your problems, your character defects, the things you beat yourself up for, instead of thinking them as something wrong with you. Instead, Call them fear responses. Oh, I'm procrastinating. Oh, that's a fear response. Huh. Okay. So what is it I'm afraid of? Well, if you know your wheel of fear, you're going to know what you're afraid of because you have a core trigger. Like my core trigger is loser. So if I'm procrastinating or if I'm, complaining or if I'm, stuck in defensiveness or if I'm trying to control something, I can stop myself immediately and go, okay, Rhonda, where is it that you're afraid to be seen as a loser? Where is it that you are petrified? And again, my first initial response is like, well, I'm not afraid of that. But if I really quiet down and listen, there is some place, there is some concern that if I don't do it right or don't do it well or don't do it better or don't say the right, whatever it is, that people will perceive me as a loser. And that to me personally may not be true for you. That word may not resonate with you, but that word for me is like a punch gut, a slap in the face. I'd rather die, right?
It triggered you every time. I love that you you talked about all the fears and the fear responses and the wheel and all of that before you ever said the word trigger. Because for me, I was like, yes, that is it. For me, I was healing my trigger, and the trigger is what was causing the fear. Irrational. I didn't know I was afraid. I didn't feel I was afraid, but it was triggering from a time where my subconscious is, for whatever reason, remembering this reminds me of some other time when you were afraid.
Yeah, well, it's even more than that. Part of the wheel of fear is part of our neurobiology. We're born with it. And it is solidified by the time you're 7 years old. And research now shows, neuroscience now shows that some of your fears are handed down through your DNA. So a lot of people go to a therapist or a coach and they go, why am I like this? Why am I like this? They're trying to find the story, right? And people think if they unlock the story, did my father abuse me? Was I, a bad student? They're just trying to figure out the story. I need the story. If I figure out the story, they think they're putting a key in and it's going to lock them and it's going to make them go, I get it now, right? Well, there's never one story. Even my parents is not, I had my wheel of fear before I was 7. So my 14, the wheel of my parents dying was just a confirmation, right? It just solidified my wheel of fear. But we all have our wheel of fear pretty solid by the time we're 7. And we learned by the time we're 7, whether from a neurobiology point of view or from our environment, from this, our culture, et cetera, that we are not safe to show up a certain way. And that's what I call the wheel of freedom. And the wheel of freedom is that part of you that is not safe to show when fear is on patrol. The neurobiology doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So if we talk about something, if we imagine something, that is real for our wheel of fear. The wheel of fear doesn't know the difference between physical and emotional fears. Because a lot of people, when they hear fearless living, they go, well, I'm not afraid because I scuba dive and I hike in the woods, right? And I'm like, yeah, I understand physical fear. We all can usually say I'm scared of snakes and not be humiliated. But there is something that is more deadly, that it runs your life much more, and those are called emotional fears. And those fears are fear of rejection, fear of failure, right? Fear of being seen not good enough, seen of worthlessness, right? The fear of looking stupid, lazy, foolish, right? So those emotional fears are what drive us each and every day. Our physical fears don't drive us most days, right?
No,
Unless we have a
those
phobia.
emotional fears will cause physical pain even. They're so
That's right.
powerful.
Because the physical fears and the emotional fears, our body doesn't know the difference. So you get a stomach ache when or get nervous flitters when you're about to be on on this top of the Empire State Building. And now you're going to go talk to your boss and you're having that same flutter. Your body and brain do not know the difference between an emotional fear and a physical fear. So it is not that you're weak. It is not that you're stupid. It is not that you're lazy. It is not that you're not good enough. It's not that you're unworthy. It's not that you're worthless. It's not that at all. It's just that there is a fear that's driving you unconsciously that creates a prison that feels like you can't get out of.
It does. I mean, I was totally there and I didn't have anything horrible happen to me. My dad didn't kill my mom. I didn't have any of those horrible things. So if you're listening and you think, well, it can't be that for me because I didn't have something horrible happen to me, some horrible tragedy, you don't have to have that. You're born with those fears
That's right.
oftentimes.
That's
So
right. It's part of our neurobiology. It's literally wired into us. We are wired for fear.
I kind of get that spiritual thing where that fear is where we need to lean in. That's something my soul needs to solve, is why is that fear there? And I try to kind of lean into it if I can and figure it out now that
Mhm.
I'm past sitting in it, not knowing I was in it and feeling victimized and wondering why I was there and all of those things. I can kind of come back. I love that you said 7 years old because I had a weird thing happen when I was healing. And for me, I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't have a great life coach or anyone. And I'm a Scorpio, so I'm kind of reclusive at times anyway, especially when I'm in my self-care mode. And I would have conversations with my younger self
Mm-hmm.
that, and comfort them in the way that they didn't get comforted before. I felt kind of
Yeah.
crazy when I was doing it. But the weird thing was I found when I was going through some of my mom's stuff, I found this photograph of myself and I was like, I remember that dress. And I'm in the first grade. And so a lot of the time when I was talking to myself, I was talking to that Deborah, that first
Mm-hmm.
grade. And I was so close probably to age 7 at that point in time
Mm-hmm.
that it's just odd that that just naturally happened for me. I have that photograph framed now because we had a
Yeah.
guest on the show that talked about doing that very thing. And I was like, I can't believe that you're saying that. I said, I've got this little picture. I said, sometimes I just look at it and go, you're a little badass bitch, aren't you?
Well, this is what I ask my clients to do is, because in fearless living, you don't get to beat yourself up anymore. Because beating yourself up is like literally gas in the wheel of fear. It literally runs the wheel of fear. So beating yourself up is not an option. And when I work with my clients, I say, get a baby picture out. I've been sharing this for 30 years. Get a baby picture out. And if you're going to beat yourself up, you've got to tell her. You've got to tell him. Yeah, that's right. Look at those eyes popping out, Deborah. Well, if you're going to beat yourself up, you've got to tell that 6-year old, that 2-year old, that 5-year old, whatever age you can find, the youngest picture you can find, and you've got to beat her up. You've got to tell her how rotten she is, how lazy she is, how stupid she is. And I guarantee you that will cure you.
I've never heard of it that way, but that is fantastic, Rhonda, honestly, because who could do it? Right? I mean, you have to have a
It has
lot
cured
of
many, many a client because that little girl, that little boy lives within you. And just like you were doing inner child work is lovely work. And it is a fearless act. It's fearless work. It is on the wheel of freedom wheel, like, that proactive behaviors. You were proactive behavior and you were literally taking care of yourself. So you were literally on your wheel of freedom. And that's the thing. All day long, we're going between our wheel of fear and wheel of freedom. And there are areas of our lives that we're already on our wheel of freedom. So if if your career is going great, you're probably living on your wheel of freedom unbeknownst to you. Or if your relationship's great, you're living on your wheel of freedom unbeknownst to you. But so if there's 9 areas of life and you're cruising on 8, you're doing awesome. Well, think about the one area that you're not doing great, the one area where you do beat yourself up, the one area where you do take yourself down. Well, let's use that to help us identify what the wheel of fear is, because that's the area that's being run by fear.
That's awesome. I also, one of the things that my former co-host and friend Christina, she talked about this. She did this and we were shocked by the results, but she's big on the self-talk and really lifting herself up. And so in her mind, she said, I'm going to record it. Then I can play
Mm-hmm.
it back to
Yep.
myself and then I'll uplift myself and I don't have right just while I'm being quiet. And she said, I played it back and I cannot believe that's the way I talk to myself. And then I thought I was lifting myself up. It was so much more negative than she realized it was. And I wonder if the same exercise saying that it might be different. If you were looking at your baby picture and you say it, would you say it the same way? But for her and for me, when she talked about it, I couldn't believe it because she is such a positive person and but boy, when she played it back, she was like, that's kind of like a backhanded compliment.
Well,
I'm not,
a lot of people who consider themselves optimistic and positive actually are ruthless with themselves. I can't tell you how many people come to work inside Fearless Living, take classes with me or work with me privately as a client coach. They come to me and you know, they tell me, well, Rhonda, if I quit beating myself up, I won't know what I'm supposed to change. And I go, yes, that's the fear talking. And I remember I taught this workshop called Fear 3-day weekend. And I had a gentleman in there and he was trying to convince me the first day that he had to keep beating himself up to motivate himself. And I was like, I know I know. I hear you, but that's not true, but I'll prove it to you this weekend. So at the end of 3 days, I asked him at the very end, I said, so tell me, tell me how you're feeling about that, beating yourself up. And he goes, oh, no, I see what it is now. He goes, it really is fear. And I said, well, so how do you feel about your possibilities? How do you feel about your future? And he goes, now in this moment, I actually believe I can do anything. I go, exactly. Because once you understand that you are in charge of your viewpoint, the lens in which you look through, you're in charge of your perceptions, you're in charge of how you see everything, then you can really see through a lens that is impactful and powerful. Doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. Doesn't mean that you don't get sick. It doesn't mean that you don't get a flat tire. That's not what that means. But it means that you can look through the lens and see clearly when you're in fear versus when you're in freedom. And speaking of voices in the recording, what I did during my transformation, during the years of healing myself, for 2 years, this was, when I was like 30, 28, 29, 30 years old, I got a little cassette recorder because that back in the day, that's all we had is a cassette recorder.
That's right.
And so I got a cassette and I, hit the play and record button, right? So you got to hit the record. And I read out loud my favorite passages of books, my favorite prayers, all positive and powerful things. And I listened to that tape alone, and I made obviously more of them. I only listened to the sound of my voice for 2 years, talking back to me. And I tell people, if you really want to shift your thoughts, listen to nothing else but your own voice. Research has shown that listening to your voice literally is so impactful and so changes your neural pathways. So if people really want to change out there, get that, we can do it on our phones now, right? Let's say whatever we want, say powerful, impactful things, read out of your favorite books, read poetry, tell yourself good things, right? Write them down, write them out.
I think a lot of people listen these days. They watch videos, they listen to videos, and they are losing that ability to listen to their own voice.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so I really encourage people, when I tell this to my students, they're like, 2 years. I go, yeah. If you want to know how I made my most drastic changes in my life, how I grew the most were those 2 years where I did not watch TV. I did not listen to the radio, which would be podcasts. There was no such thing as YouTube at that point. There was no such thing as social media. So that was fortunate, right? But I just literally listened to the powerful, positive messages that I gave myself through these multiple cassettes and, put them in the car, put them at home. I carried a cassette recorder around the house with me. If I was cleaning or doing anything in the bathroom, I would just have that on because I needed to change my neural pathways. And how do we change our neural pathways? By repetition. So if we want to truly change our responses to the world and see through a different world, we must decide that we want to live on the wheel of freedom instead of the wheel of fear. And if we're on the wheel of freedom, we're proactive and taking charge of our own healing.
And you guys know out there listening how much I've worked just to be past being in fight or flight and being able to get myself out of it and recognize being in it. For me, I felt stuck. What are some of the ways fears represented through our feelings and our actions that we don't recognize as fear?
Yeah. And the list I read earlier, the fear responses, that's how people recognize it, right? So you notice you're overwhelmed, stop and go, okay, that just means that fear's been activated. Oh, I'm complaining, stop, right? Stop and say, fear is activated. I'm people pleasing, stop. Stop. Oh, I'm people pleasing. That's not who I am. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just activated by fear. So starting to change the language of how you identify the problems, the identity, character flaws, things that you think are wrong with you, and shifting them and labeling them fear responses is literally what it's going to do is going to create a space so that you can become the observer, that you can now do that third witness, be the witness, and that will give you more awareness, which gives you more choice. Because if you can't step away from yourself, if you're in the feeling rather than observing the feeling, then you don't have a lot of personal power in that moment because you are being engulfed by it. Instead, we want to have a little space. And that's the power of the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom, because now you have a mechanism to go, oh, that's what's happening to me. Instead of, this is what's wrong with me, and pointing to yourself, I'm weak, I'm lazy, I'm stupid. Why can't I have more willpower? Why can't I be more disciplined? It's like, no, stop. You have something called the Wheel of Fear. Look at that. And then you give yourself that space to go, oh, that's the mechanism of fear. Yes, that's how it works. And now it's working on you. It's living your life for you. And you get to decide, do you want to keep living in that unconscious place of letting the wheel of fear run your life? Or do you want to jump on what I call the wheel of freedom and live from your essential nature? live from the part of you that hides out, that runs away when fear is in control. It just disappears. And so we've got to go and get that wheel of freedom and get that essential nature and go, okay, wait a minute. I am going to take care of you. We're okay. And let's take some proactive behaviors on our essential nature so we can live as our true self. We can integrate ourselves and align ourselves with who we really are.
That is fantastic. You guys know how when I advise my clients, I'm about sitting quietly with yourself, because if you do that, you'll eventually let all those thoughts come. They're important. Let them come. You're not trying
Yep.
to clear your brain. You're trying to get all of the garbage out so that you can
That's right.
hear your own thoughts and what you're thinking
That's right.
about.
That's
So
right.
I love that. And I love that you have developed a mechanism for doing it, because it's hard for people to sit by themselves and see what it is. And if there's a mechanism there to help identify it, I can see how that would be just life changing and so helpful. I didn't have that and I made it through. It's not that you can't, but wow, what a difference it can make.
Well, people say to me when they get their wheel of fear and wheel of freedom, because you have a unique wheel of fear and I have a unique wheel of fear. You have a unique wheel of freedom. I have a unique wheel of freedom. Yours is different than mine. We're different people because how we operate and how we grew up and the fears handed down through our DNA are different. So you're going to have a specific one and I'm going to have a specific one. And so once you can identify that, you can take your power back. You no longer think you're crazy. You no longer think you're stupid. That's what I used to always think. I used to think that I was crazy.
And
I
you
used
no
to think
longer,
that
yeah, and you
there's
no,
something wrong with me,
and you
right?
no longer think that it's happening to you.
That's right.
You're actually in control. And I absolutely love it. I swear, Rhonda, I could talk to you forever. Like, let's be friends. Can we be friends? Your story is so inspiring. And let's do this. Can you give our listeners just a few quick tips that will help them recognize that that's what, like, immediate, that I'm doing
Yeah.
this? How
Yeah.
can I get
Well,
it?
first, I'm going to give a free course. I want to give a gift of a course. And it's only three 15-minute videos. So it's super easy. So what I want you to do is go over to fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK, fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK. Put your name and email in. And then when you do, you're going to get access to the Fearless You platform and you're going to get access to what I call the Stretch, Risk, or Die class. And like I said, it's three 15-minute videos. And on that last third video, I actually go through my wheel of fear. So you can actually watch me do it. So you can have a more of a relationship with it and go, okay, wait a minute, I need to figure this out. And it's like, yes, you do need to figure it out. But you can figure it out. That's the good news. You can figure it out. There's a few ways to do it, which I can talk about as well. So that course has worksheets and booklets. I mean, it has everything you need in order to start moving forward. So if you have a dream, a plan, a goal, this tool, Stretch, Risk, or Die, is the number one thing that's going to support you in seeing where you're being stopped and stuck, how fear is interacting with you, and how to move through it so that you can get to the other side. So go on over to fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK. And that's the first thing. The second thing is I really encourage everyone to start keeping track of their fear responses and labeling them fear responses. So if you're about to beat yourself up, go, wait a minute, I'm about to beat myself up or I'm beating myself up. Wait, this is a fear response. I'm not a bad person, a wrong person, a stupid person. This is a fear response. Oh, I'm overwhelmed. Stop. This is a fear response. Just start shifting, relabeling, reframing the problems in your life, i.e. the fear responses, as fear responses. Because again, it's going to give you a little space and it's going to reframe them in a way that is not about you and your failings and your flaws. It's literally about the mechanism. So do that as well.
I love that so much, because labeling it and talking about it and seeing it, and even if you don't know what is causing the fear, if you know it's fear, just what's happening around you, you may not know that underlying part of it yet, right?
Yet.
But
Yep.
just saying it and knowing that that's what it is, as soon as I did and was able to say, okay, so this is fear. What are you afraid that's going to happen? What's the very worst that could, all of the things.
Yep.
And I will link to all of Rhonda's stuff and the free course that she talked about on her website. I will link to all of that in show notes. And unfortunately, I'm out of time and I so don't want you to go, because such great info and so inspiring. If you find yourself being stuck or you're just interested in hearing more about her story, I really encourage you to go check out her website and hire her as a coach. Go through her classes. She's got a great institute there. She's been doing it a long time. What a great story, Rhonda. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Be fearless, everyone.
Amen to that. Until next week, everyone, we're out.